Okay, today is February 8th, 2021. Look at this shirt. I'm not promoting them. There's a lot of dehumanizing aspects to their culture. And they will be receiving legal papers very soon. I'll make it very short in the court papers because I'm going to say that I do not need to send them a formal notice because I've already sent them quite a bit, enough that they actually have banned me from campus because they find accountability intimidating. So, and I've also not gotten a response from student unions, and also BC ombudsman claim that I haven't, with all the documentation that I provided, given evidence that it is something that falls under their mission statements, which is incredibly inaccurate. So, of course, in the papers that I will be delivering to BC courts, I'll do small claims again. I like to just do things myself. And if a judge actually understands the concept of justice, they would award a higher amount anyways. And if they don't, right away you can tell they're compromised, even if I win at the maximum amount for small claims. So I wanted to say that it's 12:30 today, okay? It's Monday, February 8th, and I had other plans for today, but I find that because of a lack of critical thinking and care and concern in the majority of people that I interact with in trying to find collaborations, I'm always working on cultural repair projects on my own that I feel is my responsibility to follow up on, and it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. So this guy, for example, he's a conservative MP, Pierre Poilievre. So if I would think that there'd be somebody in Canadian politics with courage, like a backbone, to accept a public debate against me, it would be this guy. Now, I've taken screenshots of comments I've put on his YouTube, and I pretty much gave up on him because I also sent him emails saying, well, if you say these things and if you challenge the status quo in this way, how come you're not an independent, you're a conservative? And I haven't heard back. But watching more of his videos, I can tell that conservatives are from a worldview that is pretty much entirely economics, and they believe that they're brilliant for it. Although, ask David Suzuki decades ago, he says, well, that's economics is one huge form of mental illness, and we have an entire Canadian party who believes that that is what the natural world is. So it's pretty, Now let's say I really want to get into a public debate with this guy, and he always avoids me whether he, has had a chance to read anything I send or not. And I'm persistent about it. And I wouldn't be threatening in any way, because, accountability is still not against the law in Canada. It might be in the future. But I did say a few years ago that although I don't do anything illegal, unethical, or immoral, that culture is devolving so far away in Canada from accountability that I might eventually not pass a criminal record check, even though I won't have a criminal record. And then I'll have to audit the reasons, and they'll just say, well, there's a lot about your life that doesn't add up, like ridiculous stuff, how cultures devolve like this. So if I am persistent, and let's say instead of him, who might be getting more people write him and might never get to me, but I write another MP who I could tell watching a video is not that fond of him, and an MP that is not that famous or has that many followers or that is new, I could get that other MP's attention and send them, hey, I've challenged Pierre here to public debates, how come? And then they would, publicly mention me doing this for him. So what I would predict, as he most certainly suffers from HSD like everybody else and every party in the same way, is that he would probably look at a lot of my videos on YouTube and then eventually, if he does do his homework, instead of just saying yes impulsively, or maybe saying yes and then looking at my videos and say, I'm not too sure about this guy. He's crap. I think he can maybe run circles around me there. I think, schnit in both languages. So what would he do? Well, if publicly it's happened, now more and more people know I challenge him, he would have to hurt my reputation. So he's got a lot of followers, right, that love, even though they might not be conservative, they love his kind of critical thinking to a limit, but also bully type, but also accountability. You know, there's good and bad. But his kind of approach does kind of get the attention of people, right? He's a showman, you know, like Trump was. So let's say he gets intimidated and does not believe it'll be good for his career to accept a public debate against me, even though he sees the video where I say I want to make it a win-win scenario. Is he might do what often happens to me is he's going to do a preemptive strike. So he's going to hurt my reputation in some way, which is typical of my life in Canada, which is why you can tell I'm, you know, long-term plans to kind of find a human community somewhere is part of my life's goals, even though I believe I'm unlikely to succeed before the end of my life. So if he does this, right, if his followers suddenly start putting nasty things in comments on my videos, then I would ask, what is the difference between what he did, Pierre, and what Trump did? Because, you know, I probably won't get murdered, but it's still the same kind of tactic, and it's the opposite of democracy, right? It's silencing a voice, and it's not based on merit. It's based on elite status, right, and image, and insecurities and fears, right? Because a lot of the most powerful people in the world, whether they are leaders of religion, religious movements, or military complex, or oil industries, or you know, even green or space-related new technology companies, is they have not done their own psychohistorical work, right? They haven't done enough personal development work that eventually, even if they did accept and prepared for weeks by watching my videos on YouTube or and maybe on Facebook and on any other places they might be, is they would eventually have these insecurities come up because they hadn't developed real confidence that is really built on a solid foundation, and then they would, you know, do these preemptive strikes. So that's quite sad that this is what's happening, because I don't necessarily want to, you know, be the tough cop all the time. I would like to be the nice cop. I would like to be the doctor of humanics, where 99.6% of the patients in the world would be non-confrontational. It'd be a much nicer life for me. Now, for my age, I'm still in pretty good shape, mentally, cognitively, physically, but I've still had the stress of how the rest of you, the people primates, the Homo communia, have made my life increasingly more challenging and full of obstacles that it needed to be for a good person trying to be of service. So it's quite upsetting. So I asked this lady again that works for Work BC, okay, I will ask for your help to get funding for the first aid course. Now I'm pretty sure that similar to the past, based on the price of a first aid course, that I could pay myself and then tell Canada Revenue Agency, which hasn't gotten back to me yet, hey, I have to put this as a business expense to be of service to Canadian society. Now, if I don't pay for it myself, and if I'm stubborn, like I was in the past, then no, they owe me, it's part of their mandate, they have to pay for it. But then I realize, wait, not just one, but many people are involved in this system that moved money around, like money laundering system, where it actually is that the amount that was paid to these public servants was 2, 3, 4 times the amount of this course. So this would make me part of the problem. Now, in the past, I would still do this and then tell them at the same time, do you know that this much amount of money was spent in the system to pay you because of how complicated and bureaucratically huge it is with the red tape and the micromanaging of everything in the paranoia of protecting your little Canadian dollars. So again, you are your own worst enemies when you think you are preventing fraud from people like me. So it's kind of ridiculous. And the last couple of times I took first aid courses with St. John's Ambulance, they're not going to be happy I say this, but this is the truth, is I didn't find it that great. I mean, I've taken first aid in multiple ways. One course was crappy, I got a refund once. But I'm not sure if it was with them. It might have been one of their contractors or something. But in one of the courses, one lady who was already working, she was from the Philippines, and she was already working in a place with seniors on the island, and she slept through part of it. And I'm like, even if she passes the test, are they going to give her a certificate? And they did. And of course, I also heard that during a night shift, somebody that I knew and cared about passed away in that place where she worked. Now, what if she was working at the time and she just didn't bother doing anything, just like in the first aid course where she got her certificate? So if I'm choking in a restaurant and I find that I need help, first I'm going to try and help myself. Even if there's a doctor there or somebody that just took their first aid certification, I'm going to say ambulance or something, right? Because I want to try to do it myself, pressing my abdomen against whatever I can find. And then if I pass out, at least hopefully they called the specialist with the right equipment to maybe, or they might try something after I become unconscious before the ambulance arrives. And why would I do this? It's because I think I would trust more people that pay attention and care. And also, I'd love to actually wear a bracelet that says do not resuscitate. And it's because, well, it's a longer story about Canadian society, but so if I do this first aid course, where the last few times I took first aid is I would ask, oh, did you know this? For example, did you know that the Heimlich maneuver, the person who invented it never used it in an emergency situation in his life, but in an old age home where he was, it happened one time. It was the first time he taught it most of his career. But for the first time, he used it in an emergency with an older lady in an old age home where he was, and it worked. So that a first aid trainer doesn't know that is kind of weird, right? They just regurgitate and they say, oh no, you learned this and this, and sometimes they just don't know what to add anymore because there's too many variations in the course and you're not even sure what you learned and you didn't learn, and what they taught or didn't teach. At the end of the day, what did I do? They're not too sure. Same thing from getting a vaccine. I mean, the last flu vaccine I got when I was in Quebec was, I asked the nurse. She's a nurse. I said, oh, where did this one come from? Do you know They don't know anything about the science of vaccines. So we think they're specialists. And they don't look it up. They don't care. Just next, right? So how come I might know more about vaccines and I might know more about the origin of the Heimlich maneuver is, again, fake structures of medicine and science in Canada. And the Conservative Party certainly didn't help with that in ruining a lot of the scientific paradigms that we needed to evolve more decades and decades ago. It's great we admire Alex Trebek, and it's great that we admire David Suzuki, people that have been part of some education-related paradigms that are of course Canadian origin, but still, I mean, look at most of the categories on Jeopardy, which is a show I enjoyed in the past. But if you look at the categories and you measure them in what are subjects that we need to learn to save ourselves, and also same thing, it's nice that we learn about other animals, but we need to learn more about us as an animal and our flaws in how we interact with the other animals and the rest of the natural world. So anyways, I have to do all these things, but today I was just supposed to follow up on getting a part-time job, because really unless people approach me for collaborations, I'd like to just finish being semi-retired and just being of service in a minimal way and finally start having a financial stability, that is either at the poverty line or a tiny bit below, but still good enough for me that doesn't suffer from being an over-consumer. And that's enough of a sense of security for me. And then just being of service to the community, and when I have the motivational energy, just make some progress writing my book, whether it's ever published or not. And of course, I'd love to do collaborations where I film examples of how teachers should act in classes, and also how to role model real life skills, and then give these for free to the world, because you can't teach this in theory. You got to teach this in a practical way, and you got to practice them constantly. Every year, teachers should get workshops where what happens if you get this kind of student. And again, I'm still getting what in Quebec would be bouche-trou invitations to go work as a teacher in a Quebec school board right now, when I documented that I've sent them the information of the kind of position that I want to offer them. Now, for them to accept this, they would have to go a tiny bit outside the norm and create this position, which, if they're really in charge, shouldn't be hard to do. But also, they would have to acknowledge that it is a position that is quite required. And then also, they would have to see that I do get results. And for that, they need to have a process of quality control and following up. You know, like if they hire a certified teacher and they worked in another school and doing a crappy job for 10 years and they still get a letter of reference from the principal that doesn't know the difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher, then, you know, and they don't follow up to verify whether this person does a good job. It's almost like the administrative people should have their own kids in the school and talk to the kids at night, how was it? And that'd be a way to bypass what is missing in the system to do quality control, right? Cultural assessments may be leading to cultural repair. So it's pretty sad that this is really what's going on. So of course, je ne suis pas un bouche-trou. When I worked in that school, and I was the lead, and I had two others under me, but that had been working at that school for a long time, I wasn't impressed by them, but I was learning from the kids and learning from them on how they would respond to somebody with confidence that knows what they're doing, but that also roles model being a lifelong learner. And for me to have the confidence that I can take many roles in a school is my life skills coach training, and how I've really evolved it and really understood the importance and life-changing effect that had on me, and how important that training was, and how it's adaptable skills to a lot of different scenarios in a school and in mental health and things like that. So in the last hour, let's say, of me being the lead of that school and having people with seniority under me, but they were under me, is I saw one grab a young boy who was not wrong, she was wrong, by the wrists, you know, his little wrists, and grab them both and pull him. And he just wanted to explain how she was wrong, and she did not give him a chance. Now, 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago now, I published something called Dear British Columbia Residents, and I mentioned this, that most of us, if I do counseling with you, most of us who've had issues like I describe in that article stems from a trauma from losing your voice at a younger age. Now this child, suddenly I could tell, developed a trauma, and it was about to, you know, get at his core, right? Stabilize itself as a permanent scar for him. So what I did was I spent a good 30 minutes of the end of the day with him. Now, the other lady that was technically under me when it comes to status in that classroom didn't want to interact with him. She put him in this other, semi-enclosed area where he was getting a timeout. Now, in that time, I'm an adult that's new to him, and he, barely trusts me. But I had to put the care and concern, and it took about 30 minutes. So I decided to go get a book and read him a story. But he still had his back turned to me on the table like this the whole time. But showing this care and concern, he eventually opened up and turned around and started laughing. Now, I asked him And I'm not totally sure I agree with myself there, because this was my first day at that school board and at that school, and I really wanted more opportunities to study it. But I asked him, I said, hey, I asked the kid, I said, maybe you can go apologize maybe for the misunderstanding. And this is a kid that barely speaks, okay? This is a classroom of kids with special needs. But I know he could say a word like sorry. But he has to mean it. You can't force a kid to say sorry when they also have their own interpretation, and he turned out to be right, not the classroom lady. And but I said, maybe go try to apologize to her, and maybe she'll apologize to you, kind of comment. So I was acknowledging that he had some valid points to make, and he did kind of give it a try, and that was amazing that he did, and the progress I can make in a short time. And she kind of, still had her attitude. She was giving him the cold shoulder. Now, she never got into the specifics with me, because at one point I could say, oh, that's not the right way to do things. Can I show you? Now, I'm the lead of that class, right? But she walked away. She didn't want to learn anything from me. So I had to spend 30 minutes to fix what she did with that poor boy. But I succeeded. And of course, that made me want to cry when I got home, that I did a good job. But it's so sad that that kid and the other kids in the classroom that notice all this, but that don't speak, but that are much smarter than most of the staff in the school realize, would probably maybe never see me again. And it's not like I didn't want to. It's just that je veux pas être un bouche-trou. That's, je fais pas des choses pour une paye. So I did meet a lady in the lunch break who was working on a master's degree and who's part of the higher administrative staff of that school board. But my assessment of her is she is also against the norm, and she's traumatized from that. And as much as I had the right kind of conversation with her to show, she actually said, wow, you think like me, that I could collaborate with her, is she is too drained. She's too drained to try to create this collaboration. She's surviving one day at a time. So it's quite sad that democracy, which is related to working as a team, it's related to the concept that every voice counts, especially kids, when it's about kids and it's about them, their voices count. And if they don't speak a lot, just observe their behaviors. That's why I'm so good with kids, is I notice when something triggers a frustration in them, and then we'll try a different technique. Well, these things you have to care. You can't be their worker for 3 years and say, no, I really know this kid, but make this much progress. And then in one day, I make this much progress, and nobody cares enough about this kid to actually want to learn what I did, which is not even that complicated. What's complicated is that it creates the potential for a paradigm shift where that 3-year worker and the entire culture has to look at themselves in the mirror. So it's the concept of accountability. So accountability is in parallel with democracy, and you can't have one without the other. And if you think there's one but you have proof that there isn't the other, then you're believing some pretty weird stuff. You probably are a candidate for the Conservative Party. So this was me venting a little bit. I made some good points. I'm going to share this one as a lesson in democracy, because democracy has nothing to do with the age of voting, okay, in a human culture. It's not like and I wrote about this, and some other people said, whether a kid like Greta, who has, if you actually give points to every type of intelligence that exists that is possible for our hardware, and you add up the points, let's say, of Trump, or even Biden, or the Pope, or, Elon Musk, or Bill Gates, or whatever, or your favorite TV star or singer, if you add them up, Greta is way above average when it comes to other people who might have had what we define success in one way, but in other forms of intelligence, they're developmentally disabled. So in a way, if you add this up to evaluate who is developmentally disabled, Greta is, whoa, she's much better than most of the people that you admire, the people that might be watching this eventually someday, maybe after I die. And so that's important. So should democracy be limited at an age? when she is already way beyond people that are near the end of their lives who haven't achieved the sapience and sentience that Greta has? I don't know. I can still learn a lot about kids, and when I work in classrooms, I do not. Okay, I didn't talk too much about this before, but I was doing research in Vancouver working for a Chinese school. And I say Chinese because, the majority, if not all, of the staff and students that were a very young age were Chinese. Now, as I said in another blog, is one of the first ones I posted on YouTube, is there was about incongruence. Is the kids were like, "Hey, who are you? Where's the last teacher?" And so I did a great job with this kid alone. I'm seeing a camera in the classroom, and I'm so freaking happy, but I'm afraid they're not watching. I'm afraid they're not going to study it later and see, wow, this guy, there was a particular female child in that classroom with various types of probably diagnoses, but a very nice kid. Now, I was giving the kids challenges, and it was hard to move forward with the lesson because this classroom had never had structure created. And talking about certified teachers and structure, I'll have another story at another time from the Western Quebec School Board. And so in this classroom, there was some that disobeyed, and I don't want to say it that way, but I just mean maybe they were interfering, with the learning process of the collective of the classroom, which includes mine and the other kids. Now, one kid, I gave him a couple of chances, and eventually I went to get the staff downstairs that was supposedly my boss, but that didn't have any training in education. She just was somebody who was trained in administration. And in schools that are owned, that are bragged about what the shares are worth, the administrative people aren't competent. They're just the sheep. They're the willing sheep of the owners who are not at all competent, right? They pursue profit. They don't pursue quality education. So I said, no, he's out of the classroom, and he can come back tomorrow. So he's going to be down there for the rest of the day. Now, but this kid, it worked. This kid, he was better after, and the other kids appreciated it because a lot of the other kids, they want to pursue with this lesson. And this administrative staff, she knew nothing about working with kids or education or how to lead a classroom and how teachers must be life skills coaches, but they're not. And how much these kind of schools are taking away the sense of security that it's even worth going to school or taking it seriously when there's no structure in them. So there's a lot of kids that were talking to me during the breaks, and I say, no, go and take a break. And they were just so happy to have somebody act differently because their brains know, I need to spend time with this adult to get human programming to enter my brain, which is what my DNA was meant to do. So it's kind of sad. One other teacher that is a certified teacher came and said, hey, it's weird here. They don't turn on to your... Yeah, there's a lot of things weird, but the things she was saying were weird were not the things she should be saying were weird if she puts the children first, right? Anyways, so this administrative staff, and she said, well, what are you doing in the classroom? I don't know if she was watching the video. I said, can't you just do phonics? Phonics, in a way is a gimmick. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's existed for thousands of years. Just because somebody, came up with that word and a lot of companies are making profits selling products. Now, I'm supposed to be teaching English, but I'm doing it at the same time as I'm teaching science and incorporating music. And it's working with the goal of English. But because it's different than what they're used to, let's say from the certified teachers, is I'm like, I don't think you know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing. Check out the results. Now this little girl that had, and I was incorporating accountability and life skills. And one of the kids, we as a classroom, so democracy, wanted to give him another chance, and we said, I know your energy is very high today. Now, even if they don't understand all the words, kids are curious. They're absorbing. So they're absorbing my nonverbals, the nonverbals of the rest of the classroom, and they are getting the messages a lot more than the common folks in education think they are. So he actually took on quite a big challenge that he had to do a behavioral change that was quite challenging. We all knew, the other kids knew too, because they've known him a lot longer than I have. But he succeeded, and at the end of that day, I went down the aisle where he was sitting near the back, and I went on one knee and I congratulated him. And I was teary-eyed because I knew that's a challenging thing he took on, to not leave the classroom and take on this challenge. And we made it fair and achievable, but it was still hard, and he succeeded. And kids could see me teary-eyed. Now that is human behavior. I'm role modeling sentience related to emotional intelligence, right? So but I also gave that little girl a challenge of her own. And she didn't always get the right answers, but she kept trying. She was courageous. She was a closed-off kid, but she became, with me in one day, an open kid who started doing more her assignments. And at the end of the day, I went, I noticed the parent picking her up, and I went on one knee on the ground, and I also said, she won this. I challenged the kids in the classroom, and she was the winner today of this. And she was so proud. The parent had probably never seen his child, that little girl with that face, picking her up from class at any time of her life. And then, of course, she would be even more excited and have behavioral changes and positive energies that would spread to the rest of the class after this. But, without me being there and the norm being the norm, I'm sorry, but it's not going to work out. I saw a Chinese person on the news promoting how China is very good at mobilizing things, and that is one of their strengths. But I said in a time capsule a long time ago, is they're a very powerful force for change. They're just never changing in the right ways, in the right directions still. Now this lady was saying how they have the technology that is green, that they're building quickly and using quickly, but again, and she wanted to say recycling at the end, but I'm pretty sure that if I interviewed her, not a typical journalist from, let's say, CBC, and it wasn't on CBC, that one, is I would, I don't think it was, I would ask her more, what are the long-term plans of, like raping the planet to get all these minerals out, to make this green technology? What is the long-term plan? Because you talk, oh no, we've learned in thousands of years as a civilization we're good. Well, okay, so let's say you can think in the future for thousands of years. How are you thinking about training people to maintain it, to actually prepare to recycle this, put it back into the earth when it fails, or it's really not efficient anymore, or it can no longer be amalgamated with newer technology? And of course, it's all short term, right? It's never long term, and it's one of the flaws of the Chinese nation, as much as any other nation, is they will put a lot more technology out there, just like our phones, and they'll get buried in the ground eventually, right? Oh no, let's go new, and there's no long term thinking, which is our flaw everywhere. So I'm trying to incorporate a lot of this stuff in my blogs. Critical thinking, democracy, is we all must participate in solutions, and for that we all must start with the right foundation of where we're at in our societies, what the natural world and the sciences are telling us, if we can do science objectively. And also every voice has an important thing to say, because you kind of expect them to do the role modeling too, so you must incorporate them even if they're not of voting age.